Harriet Townsend had known the gentle swoop and pull of a kite string for as long as she could remember. She was born and raised in Lavender Loop, a small coastal village named after the fields of purple flowers that bloomed in lazy, meandering arcs every spring. The sea breeze was a constant companion to the village, making kites a natural pastime. As a girl, Harriet had spent her afternoons crafting small diamond-shaped kites from paper scraps and twine, then chasing them along the beach. When she inherited her grandmother's time-worn kite studio, Townsend Kites, she fell right into the role she felt destined to fill. She specialized in custom designs, and it wasn't unusual for locals to pass her shop's broad windows and see Harriet bent over a swatch of bright cloth, shaping and stitching. Tourists would drop in, enthralled by the idea of taking home something as quaint as a handcrafted kite. Typically, they wanted images of seashells, lighthouses, or the famed lavender fields. Harriet would patiently draw out their concept, select a vibrant array of fabrics, and piece it all together with meticulous care. The tails of her kites, in particular, were her signature style. Long, spiraling ribbons in complementary shades, often with small embellishments like crocheted flowers or tassels that fluttered like dancing confetti in the breeze. One Friday, late in the afternoon, however, Harriet turned the sign on the door to closed, more puzzled than she had been in years. She had just received 2 special orders via phone from customers she didn't recognize. Both had requested large, looping kite tails featuring specific color sequences. One of the color patterns was standard enough, red, yellow, green, but they wanted the tails arranged in odd intervals with precisely measured blocks of color. The second order was more cryptic, almost as though they were describing a puzzle. The instructions involved repeated sets of purple and white ribbons, each set pinned near bead tassels in a peculiar symmetrical arrangement. Setting her pencil down, Harriet glanced at the scribbled instructions. Both calls had come an hour apart and requested that the kites be completed by next weekend. She usually appreciated such detailed requests. After all, custom work was her pride and joy, but something niggled at her, a sense of repetition. She rummaged through the folder of orders she had taken that month. 4 times in the last few weeks, she'd received phone or email requests for what seemed to be suspiciously specific tail patterns. One design involved repeating color sets in increments of 5, another in increments of 7. At the time, she'd chalked it up to particular customers wanting precision. Now it struck her as unusual. The next morning, Harriet decided to open the shop early to do a little investigating. She started by looking at her email queue. Another request had arrived overnight, this time from someone signing themselves as CM. The instructions repeated that same sense of rigid specification. 3-inch squares of cloth in certain colors, angled diagonally so that the tails patterns spelled out something in Morse code or the like. Harriet wasn't entirely sure. She just recognized the potential for a hidden message. Intrigued, she brewed herself a cup of mint tea, then laid out the records, the colors, the lengths, the intervals. She wasn't normally the type to assume something sneaky was afoot, but the consistent detail in these directions was impossible to ignore. That same day, her good friend and confidant, Oscar Berry, stopped by. Oscar was the sort of gentleman who carried a book wherever he went, with spectacles perched precariously at the end of his nose. Formerly a history teacher, he was now retired and spent his days volunteering at the local library, encouraging young readers to chase knowledge. If anyone could help Harriet figure out a hidden code, it was Oscar. "You have quite a puzzle here," he said, sorting through the scribbles of color instructions and measurements Harriet had compiled. "I see references to intervals like 4 stripes, then 2 stripes, then 4 stripes again, or a specific count of beads. Could be referencing numbers or even letters like an ABA pattern. Could it be directing us to an alphabetic cipher?" Harriet frowned, pressing her palm against her cheek. "I'm used to special colors, but never anything this, well, suspicious. Do you think someone is using my kites to pass secret messages?" Oscar's eyes twinkled. Wouldn't that be marvelous? Don't you feel a little bit like you're stepping into a spy novel? Despite the thrill, Harriet felt uneasy. She decided to see if there was a pattern linking the clients who had placed these questionable orders. Some had given addresses in neighboring towns. Others had insisted on picking up the kites in person. She gathered contact information from a few email threads, only to find most addresses used pseudonyms or random letter sequences. Shaking her head, she speculated that these orders might have come from people who simply valued anonymity and quirkiness, but it felt more deliberate than that. By mid-afternoon, Harriet and Oscar were hunched over her workshop table. She had pinned segments of ribbon into place for one of the suspicious orders. She made an important observation. Look, if I take one segment from each color requested and lay them out side by side, I get a pattern of letters, R, Y, G. In her mind, she was assigning each color a letter, red for R, yellow for Y, green for G, and so on. That simply spelled RYG, which didn't mean much. But if she assigned each color an alphabetical position, the intervals might reveal something else. Oscar started jotting notes. Red is the 18th letter if we use R, yellow is Y for the 25th letter, green is G for the 7th letter, 1825-7. Not sure if that means anything. Let's look at the next set from the other order. Purple and white, P and W. That's 16 and 23. He placed them side by side, thinking out loud. If we continue with intervals or increments, maybe we can see if these numbers come together. Harriet found herself enthralled. Ordinarily, her shop smelled of humble things, wood glue, linen cloth, sea breeze drifting through the open doors. Today, it felt charged with the energy of a puzzle. Despite the excitement, Harriet still needed to run her business. A local mother and her 2 children stepped through the door, looking for a new kite for a beach day. Harriet mustered her friendly smile, set aside the cryptic puzzle for a moment, and helped them find a glittering teal kite, shaped like a dolphin, complete with a matching tail. As she wrapped up the purchase, she considered how unassuming they were compared to her mysterious clients. After the family left, Harriet locked the door and slipped into the back office with Oscar. She caught a reflection of herself in the mirror behind the door. Her wavy brown hair was pinned back by a lavender scarf that set off her green eyes. Her white apron was dusted with thin flakes of cloth. She felt anxious but determined. She told Oscar they should keep working. 2 more puzzling orders arrived the next day. One was an email sent at dawn, requesting a swirl of pink, black, and orange tails in a very particular repeating sequence. Pink, black, black, orange, pink, black, black, orange. The second request came by phone from a gruff-sounding man who insisted Harriet craft a kite tail in only shades of blue, each shade culminating in a single silver tassel. It was so exacting that Harriet had to follow his instructions to the letter, or he threatened he'd refuse payment. "This is no longer a coincidence," Harriet told Oscar once she finished the call. "It's almost as if they're building separate portions of a larger coded design. I need to figure out if these are connected, or if I risk being involved in something illegal." Oscar hummed in agreement. "Let's start writing them all down in one place." He took a piece of large construction paper from Harriet's supply and began listing each color. Red R, yellow Y, green G, purple PY, pink pi, orange O, multiple shades of blue B1, B2, B3, etc., and the silver tassels S. Then he marked the intervals. Red, yellow, green, repeated in sets of 3, pink, black, orange repeated in sets of 8, the blues and silver repeated in sets of 6. A pattern began emerging across these intervals. Harriet struggled to pin it all down, but Oscar had a natural knack for ciphers. "Look here," he said, pointing at the page. "If we treat the intervals as letters like 5 equals E, 3 equals C, 8 equals H, 6 equals F, do you see something forming? E, C, H, F. That doesn't quite form a word yet. But if each of these sets is part of a bigger puzzle, maybe we're only seeing pieces. Could it be we need more data? As if on cue, Harriet saw the shop phone light up again. She stepped forward hesitantly. Maybe this would be another cryptic request. She answered, adopting her usual businesslike tone, but the voice on the other end was soft, almost whispery. "Hello, Miss Townsend," the person said. "I hope you're the one who makes the best kite tails in the region. I need a special design, gold and teal in stripes of 2 inches each, repeated in a set of 9. "Of course, we can do that," Harriet replied carefully, writing the instructions. She asked for a name, and the voice claimed to be Ian Marsh, but Harriet didn't recognize it. She set the phone down, her heartbeat thumping. Another puzzle piece. By noon that day, Harriet and Oscar had tallied up all the new instructions. Gold and teal repeated in sets of 9, 9 equals I. Now they had E, C, H, F, I. Rearranging them didn't yield an obvious meaning. Harriet exhaled in frustration. Oscar patted her shoulder reassuringly. "Let's not forget that the colors themselves might matter, not just the intervals. Imagine a layered code. The intervals give us one clue, and the colors might give us another. Or perhaps the intervals need to be tracked in a different order, grouping them by when they arrived." At that suggestion, Harriet compiled the orders chronologically. 5 intervals: red, yellow, green, E. 7 intervals, unnamed color set from a prior week, G. 3 intervals, purple, white, 8. 8 intervals, pink, black, orange. 6 intervals, blues and silver, age, E, G, F, I. That's nonsense, but we haven't accounted for the earliest suspicious one, the one with the repeating color blocks in increments of 4. Let's add that. 4 intervals might be D. Oscar scribbled D at the beginning. Now they had D, E, G, C, F, I. He stepped back and tapped his chin. That still doesn't make sense as a single word, but maybe it's an anagram? Or each letter stands for something. Or we're just collecting random letters, and the real meaning is in the color combos. The puzzle was driving Harriet in circles. She decided that maybe the best approach was to quietly deliver these orders without confrontation. If there was indeed a hidden message, perhaps eventually the message senders would reveal themselves. But as Harriet mulled this over, a new visitor arrived at the shop. She was a petite woman with large sunglasses and a floral scarf wrapped around her hair. She said her name was Celia Langley, and she seemed jumpy, casting furtive glances out the window. "Miss Townsend," she said, barely above a whisper, "by any chance, have you received an order for a kite with a black tail, Pierce?" Harriet blinked a few times. "I haven't had a request for a metal or plastic piece in a black tail." "No," she eyed the woman curiously. "Is there something special about that?" Celia bit her lip nervously, then abruptly apologized for bothering Harriet and hurried out. Harriet watched her go, more bewildered than before. Lavender Loop was a friendly place. Locals didn't usually dart around like frightened rabbits. Curiosity mounting, Harriet decided to talk with the local policeman, Officer Rigby. He was a cheerful, oft-spoken man with a broad moustache and a penchant for collecting unusual paperweights. Harriet doubted anything criminal was going on, but she felt it couldn't hurt to let him know about the suspicious orders and see if there were any rumors floating around. Officer Rigby listened attentively as Harriet explained. "Hidden code in kite tails, you say?" he repeated, leaning back in his chair. "Well, it's not the strangest thing I've heard, but it's certainly unusual. For Lavender Loop, off the top of my head, I haven't heard of any trouble. But I'll keep an ear out. Let me know if anything escalates." She thanked him and returned to the shop, feeling both relieved and somewhat disappointed that there wasn't more immediate help. However, Harriet tried to go about her routine, finishing normal kite orders. When evening fell, she locked up and started walking home. The skies above tinted with a dusky purple reminiscent of the lavender fields. She had made a habit of heading to the beach after work for a short walk, letting the cool, salt air soothe her. That night, just as Harriet crossed the wooden walkway leading down to the sand, she noticed a silhouette in the distance. Someone was flying a kite under the moonlit sky. The shape of the kite was just barely visible, but Harriet recognized a stark, long tail that glinted in the moonlight. Silver beads, maybe. She paused, her heart thumping. Was this one of her suspicious designs? She had delivered a kite with silver tassels earlier that day. Who was flying it so late? She watched from a safe distance as the flyer reeled the kite in. The tail ribbons were distinct: azure, cobalt, navy, each culminating with a silver tassel. Harriet's chest tightened. That was definitely one of the coded kites. She wondered if she should approach, but the figure suddenly turned off their flashlight and ducked into the darkness. Harriet thought to call out, but something stopped her. Instinct told her to remain still. After a moment, the figure vanished. The next morning, Harriet woke up determined to solve the puzzle. She tried to see if maybe the letters matched something in the local library's archives, a historical reference, name or location. She gathered her notes and trekked to the library, where she found Oscar already at the reference desk. They sorted through old newspaper clippings. Harriet began scanning any mention of codes or clandestine messages in the region's history. She might have spent hours flipping pages had Oscar not spotted something interesting in a local legend. "The Mortimer Cipher," he read aloud from a yellowed newspaper. Back in the late 1800s, a wealthy man named Jeremiah Mortimer owned land near Lavender Loop. Rumor was he invented a cipher to protect the location of his valuables. Some folks claimed those valuables were hidden in the dunes. Others said in the old limestone caves a few miles inland. Harriet's eyes widened. "You think these suspicious orders are part of the Mortimer cipher?" Oscar shrugged. "Who's to say? But if a group of treasure hunters have discovered parts of it, they might be trying to communicate using your kite design. It's possible that each color arrangement references steps in solving the Mortimer cipher or directions to the hidden treasure." For Harriet, the pieces started falling into place. This would explain the hush-hush nature of the requests, the coded intervals, and the anonymous pickups. The strangest part was that she was caught in the middle of a modern-day treasure hunt. It was thrilling, but Harriet had no desire to facilitate something unethical, if indeed they were trespassing on private land or conspiring to dig up a historical site. Yet the puzzle also captured her imagination, urging her to piece together the final clue. Oscar suggested they might replicate the entire code on a single kite. If you take each suspicious order's color and interval, put it all onto one extra-large kite, maybe we can see the bigger pattern. The code might rely on everything arranged in the correct sequence. We'll treat it like a cross-stitch of color-coded data. It was an ambitious idea, but Harriet was determined. She fetched the largest kite frame she had, intended for a ceremonial show, and began pinning swatches of cloth around the edges, labeling them. She used the tails that had been requested, sets of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, colored segments in their rightful place. Evening sun slanted through her workshop windows by the time she was done. As she looked at the finished piece, hope fluttered inside her. She flew the kite just outside, letting the wind catch it until the tail soared behind. She and Oscar watched the ribbons twist, forming fleeting shapes against the sky. In that swirling motion, Harriet noticed something. The colors lined up at certain angles. Red might overlap with purple, or teal with black, all forming diagonal lines. She realized if she snapped a photo from just the right vantage point, the overlapping lines would group the colors in sets that spelled out letters. Oscar quickly grabbed Harriet's camera. After a few minutes of adjusting angles, they managed to capture a sequence of overlapping colors. Harriet jotted down the resulting letters: T, R, E, A, S, U, R, E. Oscar gasped. "Treasure! They're seeking treasure, Harriet!" Harriet's eyes sparkled. So it's real. The code spelled out treasure, or at least references it. Maybe the Mortimer cipher is alive and well. That means these people are piecing together steps to find it? She felt a momentary sense of accomplishment, but also guilt. She had essentially cracked some treasure hunter's code. Should she help them? Keep the secret? She wasn't certain. Before she could decide, the bell above the shop door chimed. Harriet peeked out into the front of the store and saw Celia Langley again, holding a small parcel. Her shoulders shook, as though she was nervous. Celia rushed over to Harriet and spoke in a low voice, her eyes wide. "I know you're making kites for them. Please, you must understand. My grandfather was a Mortimer. His diaries mention a code, but he insisted it was never meant to be used for greed. It was a family puzzle. Now some unscrupulous people are chasing it, planning to loot a sealed landmark. You have to stop assisting them," Harriet exhaled. So it was bigger than a harmless puzzle. "I had no idea," she said quietly to Celia. "I only just realized there was a code. I promise, I had no intention of encouraging them. But how can we stop them now?" Celia opened the parcel, revealing old letters and a map. "This is the final piece of the Mortimer cipher. I followed the clues, the same ones these people have. They haven't got this part, though, and they can't complete the puzzle without it. I beg you, if you learn where they plan to dig, alert the authorities. If there's a sealed landmark, it might be historically significant. We can't let them destroy it." Oscar, who had listened quietly, stepped forward. "They've used Harriet's kite patterns to organize themselves, likely meeting at the beach or other discreet places. Let's figure out where they're heading. Then we can intercept them or inform Officer Rigby." Harriet nodded, adrenaline coursing through her. Together they double-checked the final meaning of the code embedded in their large master kite. The overlapping color line spelled out a set of coordinates near a cliff overlooking the beach. It was a dangerous spot known for hidden sea caves that had been sealed off by authorities years ago after a series of accidents. If that was the sealed landmark the Mortimer diaries mentioned, the treasure hunters were in for trouble if they tried to force entry. Harriet wasted no time. She and Oscar alerted Officer Rigby, who organized a small detail to stake out the cliffs. That evening, Harriet, Oscar, and a few uniformed officers hid behind gorse bushes on the cliff path. Clouds drifted across the full moon and the sea roared below. Sure enough, around midnight, a group of 5 shadowy figures approached with flashlights. One of them carried what looked like Harriet's meticulously crafted red Zello green kite. Another clutched a kit for rock excavation hammers, chisels, who knew what else. Officer Rigby stepped out, shining his flashlight in their faces. "Stop, right there. By authority of Lavender Loop, I have to ask what you're doing." The group scattered, but the looming presence of the uniformed officers with backup lights was enough to corner them. One man, breathless and sweating, tried to explain they were just hobbyists. Another pointed to Harriet's kite, claiming innocence. Celia, standing quietly near Harriet, shook her head, unconvinced. After some tense moments, the men admitted they were trying to access the sealed sea caves in search of Mortimer's rumored treasure. Officer Rigby arrested them for trespassing and conspiracy to break into a restricted site. Harriet felt a heady mix of relief and lingering curiosity. These men had tried to use her craft for nefarious means, but the day was saved. In the quiet hush that followed, Harriet thanked Celia for trusting her. Celia confided that the diaries revealed the Mortimer treasure was never about gold or priceless artifacts. Allegedly, Jeremiah Mortimer had stashed family heirlooms and personal documents that had sentimental value but little monetary worth. The true treasure, in Celia's eyes, was the story behind it, the family legacy and the sense of wonder it evoked. She promised Harriet that, should the site ever be opened legally, Harriet would be the first to know. A few days later, Lavender Loop returned to its normal, peaceful rhythm. The arrests made the local newspaper calling it a cunning attempt at code-breaking thwarted by Townsend Kites and the vigilant local police. Some of Harriet's regulars teased her about becoming a codebreaker in her spare time. Harriet just smiled. She continued her quiet craft, cutting bright cloth into shapes and stitching them together with care. Yet every time she attached a tail to a frame, she remembered how something so simple, a few lengths of ribbon, had led to a hidden code, midnight stakeouts, and a potential treasure. One sunny afternoon, Harriet brought the massive master kite out to the beach. She and Oscar launched it skyward, letting it glide on a steady breeze. Beneath the blue dome of the sky, the kite soared in a dance of color. With each tilt of the wind, the overlapping ribbons spelled out the word treasure again. Except now, Harriet didn't associate that word with greed or conspiracies. She thought of the intangible treasures in her own life, the peaceful dunes, the smell of the lavender fields, the sense of unity in a small village, with friends who had your back. As the largest kite Harriet had ever created bobbed and dipped gently, she felt a serene sort of joy, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Oscar laughed softly beside her. "So ends the strange tale of coded kites. Mystery solved, Harriet." Harriet gave the kite string a firm, playful tug, letting it billow in the wind. "Yes," she said, her voice brimming with warmth, "and I never knew just how much adventure can be found in a humble spool of ribbons." She gazed at the horizon, a spray of sea foam shimmering in the distance, her heart brimming with gratitude. Here, with the ocean at her feet, the lavender fields behind her, and a dear friend by her side, Harriet Townsend understood she had found her own treasure, right in Lavender Loop.